there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do to that like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, please also do that while you're here. Let's get into it. We're taking a break, if you don't mind, from our summer shoot-around series today to discuss the biggest college basketball headline from the weekend, and that's that UConn and the Big 12 are in discussions once again about the Huskies joining the Power 4 League. Norlander, as you know, these talks have happened before. Reportedly, the Big 12 presidents have been hesitant to invite UConn, but Commissioner Brett Yormark continues to push with the innovative idea about splitting up the conference's media rights, possibly being the key to convincing these presidents to get on board. Meantime, it appears UConn is very interested in leaving the Big East. Norlander, I think that's the nuts and bolts of it. What else can you tell us about what's happening with UConn and the Big 12 right now?
I just can't help but wonder how the Oasis reunion is going to affect matters, because what's going to happen here is Monday, the Big 12 is meeting with Brett Yormark to further discuss this. Obviously, Tuesday is when the formal announcement of Oasis's reunion is anticipated to happen. I'm wearing the Oasis shirt. GP wanted to go right into the UConn news. We can do that, but I'd at least like to acknowledge the biggest news of the weekend, which is that the long-awaited Oasis reunion appears to be imminent. And I'm on cloud nine because of it, so I had to rock the Oasis shirt. So if you were unaware, that is supposed to officially happen at about 3 a.m. Eastern time, Tuesday, 8 a.m. GMT time out there in England.
It appears, and I have no insight, but it appears somebody has finally convinced, after all these years, the Gallagher brothers, how many hundreds of millions of dollars they can make just by getting on a stage together and playing these stupid songs.
Stupid? How dare you?
Great songs. Oasis is one of, would you agree with this? One of the great rock and roll bands of a generation.
No, without a doubt. Without a doubt. One of the best bands of the 90s. I did see him. You've seen many an act. Have you ever seen Oasis?
I've never seen Oasis.
I saw him back in 2005. Great show. Shouts to Adam Jardy, a big pod listener who I texted with on Sunday. Apparently money is no object for him. He will be getting tickets no matter what and flying over. They're expected to play in England, maybe Scotland. We'll find out the details on Tuesday, but I honestly thought it would never happen. I really thought Noel and Liam would not be able to come together.
It doesn't matter whether it's Act, Flash, Noel. But once at some point somebody goes, it's $1 billion. All right.
Don't look back in anger. It's as simple as that.
Don't look back in anger. It's $1 billion. At some point, somebody just goes, it's $1 billion, man. What are you doing?
The memes have been incredible, and I'm quite excited for it. Hopefully, this can be parlayed into a United States tour. We'll see, but that's huge news. Bringing me into a Monday. Hope everyone's doing great. Let's get to UConn and the Big 12 here. So yes, here on Monday, I'm told by sources. Initially, speculation was it was going to be Tuesday. It's actually today that Brett Yormark will continue to pitch the Big 12's brass on the viability of this. It's obviously a noisy topic because anytime realignment happens, it's noisy. I wasn't expecting us to get here this quickly. Dave Benedict, the athletic director, did fly down to Dallas last week and helped pitch UConn's viability. I really don't know if this is going to happen, though. A couple things that I've been able to gather here, and some of this is kind of co-reporting with Dennis Dodd, who I believe may have something up, just kind of an explainer type thing on CBSSports.com on Monday. The understanding is that UConn football would be admitted at less than a full share of revenue by the time it got in at 2031, which is obviously not shocking, but at the same time, like, what does it say that if you're trying to bring a school aboard and that school is willing to not take a full share just to get out of its current media deal that it just signed, oh, by the way? I think UConn fans are a bit split on this. There are some that don't want to get lost behind in the race. There's also the big house case settlement that's looming, and the financial details of that won't even materialize for years down the road. And it's important to keep in mind that if UConn didn't leave the Big East, it would not be on the hook for as much money as it would to go into the Big 12. There's also the matter of Big 12 presidents being pretty staunchly against going beyond 16 here. Like they did vote to get to 16. That was not a smooth process, but they did what Yormark really insisted upon him. And this is almost his power of personality that this is happening again, because Yormark is so dead set on increasing the league. from a basketball standpoint, so that by the end of the decade, he can sell off the Big 12's media rights, not as one entity, but as here's our football rights. What broadcasters are going to want to pay for this distribution? Here's our basketball rights. We're going to be the best basketball league in the country. That's going to be a separate package altogether. That's what he wants to do. He wanted to get this with Gonzaga. That died on the vine. That has no momentum whatsoever anymore. Gonzaga isn't a candidate for expansion into the Big 12 at this stage. Now he's trying to get UConn back to the table there. It wouldn't happen sooner than 2026, but the Big 12 presidents, as I've been told, and a number of ADs are not sold on this. This is exploratory. If you snapped your fingers and said, okay, UConn will wind up in the Big 12, it was explained to me by multiple sources over the weekend that this would be a long process. Don't expect to look up in the middle of September and have this be completed and done. It just wouldn't happen like that. So what's happening here on Monday is Yormark trying to lay out the financials, the benefits of all this stuff. Keep in mind, he has Northeast ties, New York City ties. He has, as one source told me on Saturday, I guess it was, he has coveted UConn from a basketball standpoint since the day he got the job. I mean, he's been Big 12 commissioner a little more than 2 years now. It was a year ago when UConn was roundly denied any kind of consideration at a point when the Pac-12 was falling apart. They eventually brought over the four Pac-12 schools to join. But UConn's lack of prowess, to say the least, in football was a major demerit against the program. But Yormark maintains that that basketball is still being undervalued nationally, and it will only continue to grow as an entity. And he may well be right about that, but he's pushing for this. UConn obviously is very interested. But what matters is you need 12 out of 16 votes from the 16 members to get this to pass. It has been stressed to me, not just here, but with the Gonzaga stuff, GP, that even if you were to win 12-4 or 13-3, you don't want to sow some discontent among a new union of presidents and schools that just got together. So really you want to search for unanimity, or if not, shy of that, maybe 15-1, and it doesn't sound like it's there right now. So Yormark has some serious convincing to do. He's a really good salesman. He's a really good businessman. It's an intriguing story. But at this stage here on Monday, as we lead into him making another pitch about here's what we want to do, here's what the rev share would be, here's how we could integrate, here's why this is good, he has plenty of skeptics within that conference from actually making this happen.
You mentioned that UConn fans seem split on this. I haven't done any UConn fan polling, but that makes sense to me. On one hand, there's like real pride in the Big East and being at the Garden and all of that stuff. It matters to them, and I understand that. On the other hand, like if you can get in a Power 4 league with football money, it's almost like it doesn't matter how much you like the house you currently live in, you got to move. And so that's where we're at. I understand the hesitation among Big 12 presidents. Nobody wants to see anybody's slices of pie decrease. Brett's going to have to sell them. That will not be the case. But the people I talk to seem to believe that he can do that, because it is possible to bring in UConn without making anybody's media rights deal smaller. And among the ways he plans to do that is by, as we noted, splitting up media rights. Let me stop here for a second.
Okay.
Because I saw somebody in the chat ask, like, what would that even look like? And also just like, what it's interesting to me that nobody's ever really thought to do this in any sort of grand way. It's almost like, I don't know if you've noticed in baseball this year, not everybody's doing it, but there's this new thing. I first noticed it like an Instagram clip or something. For as long as we've been alive, first and third, one out, ground ball to short. The guy at first runs as fast as he can to second, slides. You try to break up the double play. It's just the way you do it. Just you get in there, you slide hard, try to break up the double play. Certain franchises are now running through the bag. They're not sliding in a second. They're just running through the bag. And A, you can get there quicker, they've found. And B, it can be disruptive to the whether it's a shortstop or second baseman turn, and they can make a bad throw. And it's like, we've been playing baseball forever, and nobody's ever really thought to do this. And now it's like this new idea just sort of out of nowhere. Brett is bringing that type of idea to college athletics. And I'm with you. I don't know if this is going to happen, but I'm also with you. He's a great salesman, and people I trust seem to think he's got something really valuable to sell, and he might be able to pull it off.
He does. I mean, the Big 12 has been the best basketball league in men's D1 for 8 of the past 10 years, something like that. And it seems poised to do that again this season, although we'll see as it inflates to more teams, you tend to have a soggier bottom, and so then we'll see. But all these conferences are huge now. But it's expected that the Big 12 will still be the best basketball league in the country. Would adding UConn further that? Sure. What's the margin on it? To be determined. There's UConn's been just so it's such a noisy offseason for UConn here, by the way. You win a title, your coach almost goes and flies across the country to coach in the NBA, and here you are with another bout of realignment wonderment there. Splitting the deals is certainly intriguing and probably a smart thing to do. It wouldn't surprise me if other leagues follow suit, but Yormark has been a trailblazer on this. Again, he's got to get there first. He's actually got to, when it gets down to making the deals and creating all that, he's got to get there. And while he still may well be at the Big 12 come 2030 or so, some people also think that he may not. So we'll see on all of that. UConn leaving the Big East, I would understand why I would need to do it from a financial standpoint or want to do it from a financial standpoint. You've also got, the pesky issue of a pretty massive buyout, tens of millions of dollars to leave, an exit fee, that is. That gets reduced by half if they give 27 months notice. So that's why we're not looking until 2026 at the earliest. Again, if it even happens, you have a lot of people in the Big 12, ADs and presidents that don't want to do anything. The biggest reason why this is a roadblock isn't necessarily because UConn's not good in football, although that's a major component there. Because if you admitted UConn as a full member by 2031, you basically would hope that UConn would try and find a way to not finish in the bottom 2 of the league every other year. And could it be like the 10th best team or the 12th best team in football? So it wouldn't be a complete embarrassment there. Basketball, you don't have to worry about too much because of its blue blood status. And however long Hurley is there, another 20 years or another 1 year, the job is going to recruit really, really good coaches. So I'm not too concerned about the men. Women, we obviously know Gino's in the winter of his career, but he just signed a new deal and he's going to take UConn through its final transition here under him, however long that's going to be through the end of the decade. The presidents don't know how much money and where the money is going to go with revenue sharing as a matter of the House case settlement, which could be entering its first final stage of formality here in September. But then we're not bogging the pod down with all this stuff. That stuff coming into fruition is months away, and then really understanding who's getting paid, who's not, among college players and revenue sharing. What sports will we have to reduce scholarships on? What sports we have to cut? Again, there are some schools in the Big 12, I'm told, that might not even be able to opt in on full revenue sharing the way that some of the big time schools that are going to make a ton of money are going to be able to do. And that is also obviously a very big problem, because can you do that conference wide with having Team 1 and Team 16 being able to commit to the same financial package or not? So keep that in mind as well. It is important to know that there's no expected additional cost to membership here. So none of the schools are going to be asked to give up their money in order to get UConn in. Now, how you thread that needle is another matter altogether, and you're going to need some commitment and buy-in from broadcast partners, which also brings another problem here, because as I understand it, Fox just signed, Fox is the primary distributor for Big East basketball, and UConn is the biggest program in the Big East. This deal just got done like 2 months ago formally. It is not looking to have its best basketball package reduced by losing its best member. They would still be able to benefit off of having UConn in basketball and football on Fox as a secondary distributor through rights. I get all that. But as I understand it, that's also a problem that needs to be overcome. So there's enough here that makes me wonder if it can actually come to fruition now, because as was told to me by a few Big 12 sources going back to the Gonzaga stuff, there are people in this league that are understanding of how realignment, it's an every month thing. Speculation is constant. It's never ending. We can't ever seem to settle into something. This era that we're in right now could look different 4 years from now, because no one knows really what the media landscape and what rights deals are going to look like by the time we get to 29-30. But with that being said, they did not want to be proactive in adding more schools, adding more uncertainty when you don't know what kind of environment you're going to be looking up at it in 26 and 27 and 28. And why can't we just sit with 16, see how we're going to distribute? And the reason why we are here again is because Brett Yormark, he cannot sit still. This is a benefit to how he runs business, how he runs this conference. It's attached to a large part of his reputation. He is relentless, and he is optimistic that he can hopefully get this past the finish line, but it's not his call. It's the call of presidents. And I think an important detail to know about the Big 12 here is that the Big 12, its presidents and its athletic directors, in my estimation, based on people I've talked to within that league and other leagues, that league, or at least before they went to 16, was considered to be, its presidents and its ADs almost voted in line with each other across the board. You don't always see that in a lot of leagues, GP, where an AD might be firmly against one stance, but the president, because of reason A, reason B, reason C, will vote against it. You rarely get that in the Big 12. Doesn't mean it can't change. Doesn't mean it won't change. But right now, there's a big mountain to climb, and it remains hopeful optimism, but with some real world challenges to get UConn into the Big 12. If it gets done, it will be because Brett Yormark is basically asking out for a big favor from his presidents and then buying faith that that'll eventually pay off. But there's still skepticism there.
You mentioned UConn football being among the reasons that Big 12 presidents aren't completely on board, because UConn football has been embarrassing for a while. I will say that would be low on the list of concerns for me if I were a Big 12 president, and then we can move on if you want. Like, I live in a place that had an embarrassment of a football program for decades. You losing seasons every season, nobody went to the games, nobody cared. And then eventually, it's the University of Memphis, they started investing in the program, spending money and hiring good coaches. And they've been to, I don't even know how many consecutive bowl games now. They've won conference championships. They played in New Year's Six Bowl. They are right now among the favorites, if not the favorite, to represent the group of five in the first 12-team college football playoff we've ever had. My point being, just because UConn football or any football program has been bad forever, it doesn't mean that it will forever be bad. And in fact, there are moments in UConn football history where it was actually good and respectable. You can get back to that. Throw money at it, hire the right people, and then watch it maybe not go on to win Big 12 championships, but I do not think it's impossible or even that difficult to go from bad to respectable if you have the money to do it and you are talented enough to hire the right people for the job. So I wouldn't get caught. Like, if I were in that room, I'd be telling the other presidents, let's not get too caught up on what we know UConn football has been or what UConn football is. Let's try to imagine what we could help build UConn football into, because if you can imagine that getting to a positive place, well, then you got two of the biggest college basketball programs of all time along for the ride. I understand why Brett's trying to do this, and if I were a Big 12 president, I'd be open-minded about it.
We'll put a bow on it, because this will probably be a story that very well could need an update here in pod form by the end of the week, if not pretty soon. One, just keep in mind the presence in the Northeast, the New York City area. I don't know this to be a fact, but Yormark has ties to Barclays Center. Like, I can totally see in my mind Brett Yormark thinking, like, we'll get UConn in, and then we'll have the Big 12 tournament at Barclays Center by like 2030. So I can totally see that. He thinks there's immense value there. There's a lot of legitimacy to that. We'll see. The football side is intriguing because UConn's obviously a state school. You're going to need significant booster donations, because they have to financially commit a lot from a football standpoint to even make this worthwhile, and it's not going to be easy to do that, particularly when in this state, as a resident of the state and knowing no shortage of UConn fans, I can speak to this with plenty of knowledge on it. The men's program and the women's program in basketball so far exceed the interest level of football. I mean, it's not. Now there's a niche fan base of UConn football fans that do exist, and they are vocal. They want the program to be legitimate, but it is going to take a ton to convince the right people to put enough in to a state university that has to fund a football program. And then at the end of the day, Big 12, the outlook is by the end of this current media deal, Big 12 membership is hoping to bring in close to $50 million per school and at the end of a fiscal year. UConn would be well short of that. It would not join as a full member there. But that being said, it would be well south of 45 million, but north of the current 7 or so million that it's getting under the basketball deal with the Big East. So we wait and see on more. Maybe we'll have news, by the end of Monday. Who knows? But that's the latest on this stage with UConn as we nothing like, man, GP, nothing like a realignment story in the middle of August. I mean, it just never stops. These commissioners, presidents, TV networks, they can't sit still for a month at a time. We just can't let things be. And so here we are with UConn. We'll see if we get more traction by the end of the week.
And if we do, we'll revisit the conversation, I promise. Moving on for now, our Candid Coaches series is underway over at cbssports.com. One of the questions that has gotten a lot of attention, perhaps the most attention, is a question about what programs college coaches believe have the best NIL situations. We're going to spend a few minutes on that. We'll do it next. But first, let's get a word from our partners.
Saturday is big time on CBS. Number 2 Ohio State welcomes Akron into the Horseshoe. Then more college football in prime time with UCLA taking on Hawaii. Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
So, Norlander, we asked more than 100 college basketball coaches to name 3 schools they believe have the best NIL situations, and we phrased it that way intentionally because here's the truth. Nobody knows. Nobody knows for sure. It's not like all this is documented in Indianapolis or anywhere. It's just a lot of reporting and a lot of what are you hearing. And we do figure that the men who are in the middle of, and women who are in the middle of these negotiations should have a better idea than most about who's really rocking and rolling at the tip top of the sport as it pertains to NIL and who's not. So we just asked, again, more than 100 college coaches, give us a list of 3. Just what do you believe? What are you hearing? What do you think? And Arkansas appeared on 73, nearly on 3 out of every 4, and was the leading vote getter by a significant margin. Kansas finished second, appearing on 43.2% of the ballots. Were you surprised that Arkansas, A, was number 1, and that Arkansas, B, won this poll by as much as it won it by?
Arkansas. So when we do these questions, sometimes I try and think, all right, who's gonna win this? Try and guess. I would have guessed Arkansas. The margin is surprising. Here's our top 5: Arkansas 73.7, Kansas 43.2%. That's 30-point gap, folks. BYU third, 30.6, Kentucky fourth, 25.3, and then Indiana at 16.9%. That is the top 5. Arkansas is number 1. Probably fairly so. That would be my guess too. Ask me to bet a paycheck on it. If you could really dig to the truth of it, I think Arkansas is working with more money than anyone in the sport, particularly because this was one of the requisites for Calipari to take the job and leave Kentucky. And there's all this renewed optimism, enthusiasm. There's a good year to ask this question, GP, not just because NIL is still, it's in its early stages, I guess, but we had more coaching changes this year than any year in the history of the sport. We had more coaching turnover at the high major level, and according to my research, than at any year of the sport. And if you want to get an injection of NIL, make a coaching change. If you're a proud program that's in a little bit of a rut or a stall, that's exactly what Arkansas did, and you see the benefits there. It's what Kentucky did, and although there was no shortage of NIL, it's not as I've been told. Kentucky under Cal, it was good. Don't get me wrong, but there were still maybe some limitations, more than what people might think. And now Mark Pope comes in. You got some of that. So, yeah, Arkansas working with what's believed to be north of $8 million in NIL. Maybe a bottomless piggy bank, pun intended. No surprise there, but it was far and away. I mean, I asked coaches to give me 3, and if they were comfortable, rank the 3. Most coaches did rank. Again, admittedly, some of it is guesswork. But I'll also say this. These coaches, a lot of the people that we are polling, we do ask some small school coaches, so they're not going to really know. However, even in those cases, sometimes they'll have really good friends working at the high major level that are doing this. And we are interviewing assistants and head coaches at top 30 level programs, and they are often in recruiting battles in the transfer portal against these very schools. And so they are hearing, again, is it with 100% verification? Of course not, but they have to be willing to either bargain and negotiate with these dollar figures that are being told to them by player agents, parents, players, and they know the schools that they're recruiting in. So it is, in my estimation, GP, this is based in a lot of reasonable speculation, and I don't think BYU is actually third, although I think it's pretty high. But generally speaking, Arkansas, KU, BYU, Kentucky, Indiana, then you get to K-State, Baylor, Louisville, Alabama, Illinois. Those are the top 10. If you could actually figure out the numbers and you told me that's what's, 7 of those were truly in the top 10, I'd believe you.
I like you was not surprised Arkansas was the leading vote getter. I was surprised that it was by this significant of a margin. I handled this question in terms of the writing for it. And one of the things I noted was that there is you can sort of see some common denominators here. The leading vote getters are blue bloods and or schools with new coaches. Arkansas, traditionally strong program, new coach. Kansas, blue blood program. BYU, new coach. Kentucky, blue blood, new coach. Indiana, blue blood. Kansas State came in at 6th. It's still relatively new coach. Baylor at 7, strong program, won a national championship. Louisville tied for 7th with Baylor, traditionally strong program, new coach. Alabama at 9 is a little surprising to me because based on I wouldn't have been surprised if Alabama was top 3. And based on all the conversations I've heard this offseason or been a part of this offseason, for Alabama to be 9, and let me just get your thoughts on that. Alabama 9, Duke 12.
Yeah.
On 13, tied with North Carolina. You surprised Alabama, Duke, UConn, North Carolina were so low on these lists?
No, I think Bama being in that range, maybe like 1 or 2 slots low. I'm not too surprised on that. Duke not being top 10 surprised me. I think in actuality, Duke probably has top 10 NIL, certainly NIL earnings potential. Now Cooper Flagg will adjust that significantly. In fact, Adrian Wojnarowski just reported moments before we went live. He has a New Balance shoe deal. So congrats to New Balance for getting the most high prospect in years. But Duke being outside the top 10 is a little surprising. UConn not. UNC, that's probably sounds about right. But Duke, UConn, UNC, not in the top 10 of NIL perceived by coaches, 3 blue blood programs. Is that a little surprising? Yes and no. I mean, it really is circumstantial based on where you are as a program, who you have willing to donate millions of dollars, if not hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, the rich people around your program, how you can rally with that. In addition, obviously, to your everyday fan support there. So a little bit of surprise, but not too much. I think the notables that got either only 1 or 2 votes, like Arizona, pretty low, but that kind of falls in line with what I've heard there. Georgetown had a little bit of noise about its NIL. I think it got 1 vote. Ole Miss probably a little bit underrepresented versus what reality is there. Oregon as well, Villanova as well. These are programs that only got 1 or 2 votes. They probably deserve to get a little bit more, but an interesting insight without a doubt. And I should note, we polled more than 100 coaches. I think I had 6 coaches that opted. Normally, I hold the feet to the fire, these coaches, usually, and have them answer every question, because occasionally they'll just pass. But on this one, I had 6 coaches say, listen, man, I don't work in this space. Like, I can't even, I'd be truly guessing, and I'm not going to do that. So for the most part, we got answers. But this one, we might have been just a shade under 100 coaches that gave us responses.
Yeah. So I phrased it in, very deliberately. We asked more than 100 college coaches. I think answers to this question was slightly below 100, because I want to say you had 6 and maybe I had 3 people who just decided, I don't know. And I believe they were entirely coaches who either work in the Ivy League or at the low major level, where they just don't have NIL. They have no access to NIL. They're not, they're not, if they're recruiting somebody and there's an NIL component connected to it on the other, they get out of that because they know they can't win it, or they're going to have a hard time winning it. So they declined to answer. But for the most part, people did answer. And again, they say, who knows? I got a lot of who knows. Mm-hmm. But this is what I believe right now. And I heard this a lot. Tell me if you heard this, and then we'll get to one more question before we get out of here. A lot of coaches said you could ask this question every year and you'll get different answers every year, because it's going to change based on how the next year unfolds. Like a big program that needs a new coach, like let's just say Indiana. And I'm not predicting this. I've got Indiana in the top 20, the top 25 and 1. I think they're going to be good. I'm not trying to make jokes. Let's say Indiana's not good and they miss the tournament and they make a coaching change. Mm-hmm. We ask the same question next August. Indiana could rank number 1 because they'll have a new coach and people just throwing money at NIL to try to, prop him up to succeed. So this could all change year to year.
That there, without a doubt, this is a snapshot of 2024 specifically when NIL got even more inflamed. Real quick on this, let's do the other NIL one and just give people an indication, because we asked, listen, give us what you know. What's the most that a player or their representation has asked for you in NIL? And almost all of these responses I take to believe were in this year's cycle, obviously, when the asking prices tripled or quadrupled there. We had what, 7, 8, 9, 10 responses say 2 million or north of that. And that's your Big 12s, SECs. I actually had one school from the American tell me they had one player request 2 million. In the 1 million to 1.6 million range, you got everything from SEC, Big 12, Mountain West, a couple of Mountain West, ACC. So it's all the power leagues, but there are a couple of schools outside the Power 5 in basketball, if you will, that are being requested that much money there, which I found to be interesting. And then once you get into the more than 250,000 but less than $1 million range, I got ACCs, I got Big 10s, I got A10s. I had an American school tell me 800,000. I had an Ohio Valley school tell me that there was a player they were recruiting in the portal who requested $400,000. The Ohio Valley, Missouri Valley, 350,000. Conference USA, 300,000. This is the most. This is the single most. It's not whether they got the player or not. It's what the asking price was as the player and the representation we're trying to feel out the market there. But it was a wide swath, GP, because even when you get down to, from my responses, I had Big Ten school tell me they had their best offer was a $200,000 player, which is intriguing to hear for a Big Ten to be that low. That was the most they had offer from a player in the portal there. But once you get sub 200, then you're getting into your SoCons, Big South, smaller schools. But it was interesting. I was more intrigued by this one than the who has the most NIL budget, because I was getting firsthand accounts from a lot of coaches on players, and a lot of these coaches were laughing after the fact at some of these requests because they're like, it was too much. We weren't going to get them. But at the same time, you and I both know that these schools eventually did have to pony up to get players. Sure. But they weren't eager to say, yeah, you know what, they got us. Like they had us cornered. We had no choice. We offered up $550K. Like, what were we going to do? But that was intriguing to know, no doubt about it.
I had one coach, the highest number we heard, one coach told me.
Yeah, this is insane, by the way.
$5 million. He said we were asked to pay $5 million for a player. And
I don't know. And I don't know who that is. And what that had to have been $5 million all told, because there have been a few players that have been like, all right, I want this, plus the car, plus the living situation. Maybe they were factoring it all in, but that's $5 million is a quarterback at the high major level. Like that's insane, but that was an anomaly.
Yeah. We have never heard of a college basketball player actually getting that type of money. I believe the highest documented numbers are going to be connected to Coleman Hawkins and Great Osabor, right around $2 million.
Yeah.
So the school didn't pay the $5 million, but they were asked for $5 million. What I thought was most interesting was a couple of things. One, at the power conference level, not everybody is paying it. I had some power conference coaches say, like, we're not really doing this right now. Well, others are, and we're just not. We might have to, but we're not right now. But you're getting asked at the power conference level. Somebody's asking you for $1 million. I believe that the polling showed roughly 3 out of 4 Power 4 coaches we asked said, yes, I have been asked to pay $1 million for a player.
Yeah.
The most, again, was 5. The interesting thing I heard from a lot of different coaches was that the numbers have jumped dramatically in recent years, what people are asking for. 2 years ago, somebody who was asking for $40,000 might now, that same caliber player, be asking for $200,000. And somebody who was in the market for $200,000 2 years ago is now in the market for $1 million. Like the numbers that people are requesting and the numbers that people are getting has maybe doubled or even tripled, maybe quadrupled in just 24, 36 months.
Yeah, it's been, and you heard the stories about this going back to April when when coaches were encountering this after there was a naive belief that maybe the NIL market this year versus 23 might stay level or not slightly dip. I think there was anticipation maybe it would slightly dip. No, sir. An absolute spike there. And it made for a very volatile transfer cycle. And big picture, like 10,000 foot view on the sport, I'll be interested to see when it comes to these preseason prognostications with schools that have a lot of roster turnover. Like I'm talking like 5+ transfers on a given roster. how many of those teams will be able to provide successful seasons, top 25 level seasons? Because we could be in for some real tumult there. I'm intrigued to see that there. We got a few more minutes before we got to get out of here. GP's got to obviously do his radio show in Memphis there, but there's a few more questions we talked on. What have we not talked about? There's one that's going to go up later today that I handled that we can get to. If not, what else, Candid Coaches, why stood out to you?
Well, of the ones that have published, we touched on 2 connected to NIL. We asked coaches who they think will be the best team. Kansas was your leading vote getter. That lines up with the top 25 and 1, where I also have the Jayhawks at number 1. We asked coaches who they think will be the best player. We've touched on this in the Duke pod, I believe, for the summer shoot around.
But if people didn't listen to the Duke pod, let's refresh them on the results.
The leading vote getter was Cooper Flagg by a significant margin, which, as I said on the Duke episode, means something to me. Coaches are usually the last people to want to buy into freshman hype. They kind of roll their eyes at it when we do it. And yet they're on board with Cooper Flagg. Like across the country, people think he's going to be great, like quite literally the best player in the country. If that happens, he will go down as the youngest Wooden Award winner in college basketball history. I think this one's interesting. And I don't know if it's publishing today or later in the week. I know you're handling it. Will a woman be a head coach of a men's
today?
Division
Yeah, we can get into
this.
This will. Chances are, if you're watching live, it's not up yet. But if you're listening to this, it's already published there. So yeah, we can dive into it.
We just asked more than 100 men's college basketball coaches, do you believe a woman will be a men's Division I head coach by the year 2030? The answers came in yes, 62%, no, 38%. I believe, if I remember correctly, my polling was a little closer than that. How would you answer that question? What do you think?
Well, first of all, we asked this question 10 years ago, which is why I brought it back here. Now, when we asked it 10 years ago, first of all, shouts to Jeff Borzello. He took the writing duties on that one. But we asked, let's see if trivia time.
Okay.
In 2014, we gave it a 25-year runway. We said, will there be a woman coaching in Division I as a head coach by the year 2039? What do you think the percentage was then?
I would say it would be like 70% yes.
It was 58-42 yes, with a 25-year runway. So now, 10 years later, we shrunk it down 6 years. 62% of the coaches that we polled said yes, 38% no. I have a takeaway that's going to be included in this. I agree with those who say yes. I think we'll get there. The reasons why coaches said no, and let's be clear on this, as I include in the piece, a woman doesn't need to coach men to validate her greatness as a coach. All right. Dawn Staley never has to leave women's college basketball. She's already an all-time great, a Hall of Famer. We know that she's an absolute legend. You can go down the list. Becky Hammon, who turned down the Colorado State men's job in 2018, would have made this question moot if she just decided to go one way instead of the other. Oh, by the way, she's now the coach of the reigning back-to-back WNBA champ Las Vegas Aces. I think we will have a woman coaching Division I by the year 2030. I think it might be up against the buzzer. We might get 29 or 30 before we get there. But the reason why a lot of coaches voted no was this, and their reasoning is sound. They said, if you're going to have this happen, you probably need a lot of women working as assistants in men's Division I basketball so that they can ramp up. I agree with that, but I think that will happen eventually after 2030. Once we get, I think that's going to be the second, the third, or the fourth woman to coach in Division I. The first one, I think, is going to be an accomplished coach at the women's college level or the WNBA level that chooses to want to take this on. And ultimately, when it happens, I hope that it is regarded as the historic moment that it will be, but it is on merit. It is not because of publicity. It's not because of a gimmick, because it won't be. There were some coaches that voted no, that it wouldn't happen because of the increased viability with women's basketball, which is entirely correct. However, I would point out that with rare exception, on average, you're still going to be paid much more to coach in men's D1 than you would in women's D1. And women are just like men. Like, money should be and will be an obviously motivating factor. So if you become a candidate, that can also be a factor there. I'm optimistic. I think it should happen. I think hiring trends among women in men's sports, period, still needs to improve across college athletics. I referenced a survey that was done recently and reported on by the AP there, but a ripe topic for discussion. I'll be intrigued to see who it is, when it is, but I would narrowly say yes. I'm optimistic that it will happen, and when it does, it will be rightfully celebrated.
I'd like to say yes. I agree with you. It should happen, and I actually think it probably should have already happened and would have already happened if, say, Dawn Staley wanted to do it or Becky Hammon wanted to do it. I'm not sure it will. I mean, think about the NBA. They're so further along in having women on staffs. And still, we haven't had a woman become a head coach in that league. But there's a woman on, I don't know every staff, but I think most at this point, most NBA staffs are going to have a woman on it.
Yep.
Most Division I men's staffs do not. I mean,
I know.
almost, yeah,
Overwhelmingly, yes.
Yeah. So I think if there's going to be a process to this thing, again, Dawn Staley could change it overnight whenever she wants to. And I guess there's a handful of people like that, small hand. But you probably need the next step is a Bill Self or a Dan Hurley putting a woman on staff.
Yeah, which, by the way, Pitino did at Kentucky more than 30 years ago. But yeah, you're probably right. And it should happen. I note in the piece, before we get out of here, college basketball has had 3 assistant spots on its roster here for a number of years. That jumped to 5. Now, you can still only put 3 on the road with the head coach, but for proper title purposes, there are now 5 assistants. So this was the first year that was allowed. There's really no reason why you can't have more women represented in the assistant ranks in men's D1 that know basketball, because there are qualified candidates out there. But a couple coaches said, listen, there was one head coach that told me, I've actually been searching for this for the past couple of years, have not found a female candidate that would want this just yet. So that it does cut a little bit both ways in terms of there's not a wide pool of women that are seeking to do this. However, there are definitely women that would be open to it, and we'll see if it happens. 2030 I felt if we asked 10 years, it would be an overwhelming yes. This was, I tried to get close to a 50-50 as I thought we might get. And yes won out more than no, but there are intriguing reasons both for and against. Again, that story will publish later on Monday on CBSSports.com, and we've got more Candid Coaches questions that we'll roll out to finalize our annual series that are publishing the rest of the week.
All right, let's call that an episode. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Terry Teagle, legend. Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching and listening to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, Apple, Spotify. There's more of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments. So do that. We'll talk to you again later on this week. Till then, take care.